I'm Rick Mulligan, 52 years old, and I've been driving trucks for over 30 years. Seen a lot of strange things on the road, but nothing like this. I got the call last Tuesday from some faceless dispatcher. Said they needed me to deliver an old, oversized crate to a remote town called Black Hollow, way up in the mountains. No questions asked. That's how they always start. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was a late-night job, and the pay was good. Real good. So I agreed. When I pulled up to the warehouse, a couple of guys in dark coats were waiting. They looked nervous, kept glancing over their shoulders. Without a word, they loaded the crate into my truck. The thing was massive, old wood creaking under its weight. It smelled weird too, like rot, mixed with something metallic. I asked what was inside, but they just stared at me like I shouldn't have asked. "Just get it there before dawn," one of them finally said. No stops. No opening the crate. I shrugged, nodded, and climbed into the cab. Whatever. It wasn't my job to pry. The drive started off easy. The interstate was mostly empty, the kind of night where it's just you and the hum of the engine. I kept checking the clock, making sure I'd get to Black Hollow on time. But as I drove deeper into the mountains, something felt off. The radio kept cutting out, static creeping in, and the temperature inside the truck dropped fast. I cranked up the heat, but it didn't help. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, almost expecting to see something behind me, but there was nothing, just the crate sitting there, looming. About halfway through the drive, I heard it, a soft thump, like something inside the crate moved. At first I told myself it was the road, maybe a bump or a shift in weight, but then I heard it again, louder this time, like something was trying to get out. My gut twisted. I wanted to pull over, check it out, but I remembered what the guy said. No stops, no opening the crate. The road got narrower, winding through thick woods. The thumping grew louder, more insistent. Whatever was in there, it wasn't happy. I gripped the wheel tighter, my palms sweaty despite the freezing air. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appeared on the side of the road, just standing there, watching. Pale face, eyes dark and sunken. I slammed on the brakes, but when I looked again, the figure was gone. That's when I heard the crate crack open. I slammed on the brakes harder than I ever had in my life, the truck screeching to a halt in the middle of the road. My heart pounded as I glanced back at the crate. A jagged line ran down its center, and the wood groaned like it was being forced apart from the inside. For a moment, I sat there frozen, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the crack. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of the truck and run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then a hand, pale and thin, pushed through the gap in the wood. No, not a hand, a claw. The fingers were too long, the nails sharp and blackened. I gasped, my breath visible in the cold air inside the cab. Whatever was in there wasn't human. The crate creaked again, louder this time. The thing inside was pushing harder, trying to break free. My mind raced. The guy had said not to open the crate, but it was opening itself. What the hell was I supposed to do? Then I remembered the figure I'd seen on the road. That pale face, those dark eyes. There was something about it, something familiar. My stomach churned as a terrible thought crossed my mind. What if it hadn't disappeared? What if it was still out there, watching? I couldn't sit there waiting to find out. My hand reached for the gear shift, but the truck wouldn't budge. The engine had cut off, leaving me in the dead silence of the mountain road. The claw pushed farther out of the crate, followed by another, then a head, long, twisted, with skin stretched too tight over a skull-like face. It let out a low, guttural growl, its eyes locking onto mine. I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't open. The creature fully emerged from the crate now, its body unnaturally long and thin, hunched over as it crawled toward the cab. I could hear its joints popping, its breath rasping, fogging the glass. Suddenly, the truck roared back to life. My hand shot to the wheel, and I floored the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, but the creature clung to the side, its claws digging into the metal. I swerved, trying to shake it off, but it held on, its eyes glowing in the reflection of the side mirror. Then I saw it, up ahead, the same figure from before. This time it was in the middle of the road, standing perfectly still, as if waiting for me. I didn't have time to stop. I slammed into it head-on, expecting the impact, but nothing. The figure vanished the moment the truck passed through it. And then the creature was gone too. I pulled over, panting, my heart racing. The road was empty. The crate sat still, broken open but now empty. Whatever had been inside was gone, but somehow I knew it wasn't over. I sat there, staring at the shattered crate in the rearview mirror, my mind racing. What had just happened? That thing, whatever it was, had vanished. But where did it go? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. My hands shook as I pulled back onto the road, the engine rumbling under me like a distant storm. The air felt heavier, colder, as if the world around me had changed. Black Hollow was still miles away, but now I wasn't sure I wanted to get there. The money didn't matter anymore. All I wanted was to be done with this, but some force, something stronger than fear, kept pulling me forward. I had to finish the job. There was no turning back. As the road twisted deeper into the mountains, the fog thickened, swallowing the trees and cliffs around me. My headlights barely cut through it, the beams bouncing off the mist like they were hitting something solid. Every so often, I thought I saw shadows moving in the fog. Tall, lanky figures gliding alongside the truck. And then I saw it. Black Hollow. The town wasn't much more than a cluster of old, decaying buildings. No lights, no signs of life. It was like the place had been abandoned years ago. The road dead-ended into what looked like a town square, with a single crooked street lamp flickering weakly in the center. I parked the truck, my heart pounding. The dispatcher hadn't told me where to take the crate, but something drew my eyes to the far corner of the square. A church. Its doors were wide open, and beyond the entrance, only darkness. The same unsettling cold seeped out, wrapping around me even from a distance. The crate was empty, I kept telling myself. Whatever had been inside was gone. But I had to go in. Something in me knew that it wasn't over. Not yet. I stepped out of the truck, my boots crunching against the gravel. The fog thickened around me as I approached the church. The air smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic. Blood? I hesitated at the doorway, peering into the pitch-black interior. That's when I heard it, a voice low and raspy, calling my name. Rick. My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone my name. Slowly I stepped inside, the sound of my breathing too loud in the silence. The church was empty, rows of broken pews stretching toward the altar. The voice came again, louder this time. Rick. My eyes locked on something at the front of the church, a figure standing by the altar, its face hidden in the shadows. But I knew who it was. The figure from the road. It took a step toward me, its pale face now visible under the dim light, and then it smiled. A cold, hollow grin that sent chills down my spine. You delivered it, the figure whispered, but now you belong to us. Before I could react, the doors slammed shut behind me, trapping me in the darkness. Story the end.
Story number 2.
My name's Bill Carson. I'm 52 years old, been driving trucks for over 30 years, hauling everything from frozen meat to high-end electronics. Never had any trouble with my loads until last week. I'd been hired to transport a shipment of high-end furniture from Denver to a warehouse in Reno. But halfway through the trip, something strange started happening. It all began when I stopped at a small truck stop in the middle of Nevada, just off Route 50. I did my usual checks, tires, oil, and of course, the cargo. The load was packed up tight, just as I'd left it back in Denver. I grabbed a cup of coffee, stretched my legs, and hit the road again. 2 hours later, I pulled into a rest area to get some sleep. The highway was quiet, not a single car in sight. I popped open the back of the trailer, out of habit more than anything, and that's when I noticed something was wrong. A large oak table, the centerpiece of the shipment, was missing. It didn't make any sense. The doors were locked, the seals intact. No one could have tampered with it, but still, the table was gone. At first I thought maybe I'd miscounted, but I knew that wasn't the case. There was no way something that heavy could just disappear without a trace. I locked up the trailer again and chalked it up to fatigue. Maybe I'd check it again in the morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept drifting back to the missing table. When I finally did doze off, I had strange dreams. Dark, twisted shapes crawled through the woods along the highway, shadows whispering my name. The next morning, things got worse. 2 more pieces were gone. A leather armchair and a small glass cabinet. I hadn't stopped anywhere. How could it have vanished overnight? Panic started to creep in, but I couldn't turn back. The delivery deadline was looming, and I needed to get to Reno. As I drove, my radio began to crackle. It played a low hum, almost like a chant, but there were no stations out there. The static made my skin crawl. The next rest stop was another 50 miles ahead, but my hands were shaking so bad I had to pull over again. I opened the trailer door and my stomach dropped. Half the load had vanished, just like that, gone into thin air. I stood there, staring into the empty trailer, heart pounding in my chest. There was no sign of a break-in, no damage to the locks, no ripped seals. The furniture was simply gone. I rubbed my eyes, trying to make sense of it, but nothing added up. 30 years on the road and I'd never seen anything like this. As I climbed back into the cab, the air felt thicker, heavy with something I couldn't quite name. The low hum from the radio persisted, growing louder, like it was trying to get my attention. I shut it off, but the sound didn't stop. It seemed to vibrate through the air itself. I hit the gas, determined to make it to Reno as fast as possible. The truck roared down the highway, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Every now and then, I'd catch movement in my rearview mirror, just a flicker of shadow, like something darting between the trees. I told myself it was just my imagination, that stress playing tricks on me. By the time I reached the next rest stop, it was dark. I was exhausted, my hands trembling as I parked the rig and headed for the trailer. My breath caught in my throat. Everything was gone. The trailer was completely empty. All the furniture, thousands of dollars worth of high-end goods, vanished. My pulse quickened and I looked around, half expecting someone to be lurking in the shadows, but the lot was empty. Not possible, I whispered to myself. I paced around the truck, checking every corner, every bolt. The seals were unbroken, the locks intact. How could someone take an entire load without leaving a single trace? The hum returned, louder than ever, buzzing through my skull. This time, I couldn't ignore it. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was all around me, pressing in from every direction. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something was very wrong. Just as I was about to climb back into the cab, I heard a creak from the empty trailer. My heart nearly stopped. Slowly, I turned around and saw nothing. But the creak came again, echoing from inside the trailer like wood shifting. I swallowed hard and walked toward it, flashlight in hand. As soon as the beam of light hit the empty trailer bed, I saw it. Footprints. Huge, heavy footprints, pressed deep into the floor. They trailed off toward the darkness at the back of the trailer, like where the shadows seemed to writhe like they were alive. Suddenly, the truck's engine roared to life on its own. The engine's roar sent chills down my spine. I bolted toward the cab, but before I could reach the door, the truck lurched forward on its own. I stumbled back, watching helplessly as my rig rolled into the darkness, its taillights flickering like dying embers. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, my entire load gone, my truck vanishing into the night. For a moment, I just stood there, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Then I heard it again. The creak, louder now, coming from behind me. I turned slowly, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The footprints in the trailer had spread, moving closer to the edge where I stood. The air around me was thick with that hum, now almost deafening. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a presence, something alive and hungry. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the air, distorted and garbled like it was coming through a broken radio. Not yours. Never was. My flashlight flickered, and the beam caught a glimpse of something at the back of the trailer. A shape, tall, hunched, with elongated limbs that seemed to shift and blur in the dim light. Its eyes, glowing faintly, locked onto mine. My body froze. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The creature, or whatever it was, stepped forward, each movement slow and deliberate, its heavy feet making the trailer creak under its weight. The air around it shimmered like heat rising off pavement, distorting its form. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the relentless hum. The creature stopped, its head tilting slightly, almost as if it were considering the question. Then it smiled. At least, I think it was a smile. A grotesque stretching of its face, exposing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Return what was taken. Before I could react, the truck's headlights flared back on in the distance, blinding me for a moment. When my vision cleared, the creature was gone and the truck was sitting there, engine idling, as if nothing had happened. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward the cab, jumped in, and slammed the door shut behind me. My heart was racing, hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. The truck felt wrong. The air inside was thick with that same oppressive energy, but I couldn't stay out there any longer. I revved the engine, and as I pulled away from the rest stop, I glanced at the back of the trailer in the mirror. It was full again, every piece of furniture exactly where it had been before, but something else was back there too, just out of sight, hidden in the shadows. And then I realized I hadn't returned what was taken. I was the cargo now. Story the end.
Story number 3.
I'm Dave Thompson, 45 years old, and tonight feels like any other night on the road. It's been raining for hours, and the rhythmic sound of the windshield wipers is almost hypnotic. I'm hauling a load down I-75 somewhere between Ohio and Kentucky when I see him, standing on the side of the road, soaked to the bone, thumb out, pale as a ghost. I pull over. What can I say? I'm not the type to leave someone stranded in the middle of nowhere, especially not in this weather. Need a ride? I ask, rolling down the window. The guy nods and climbs in. He doesn't say much at first, just sits there, dripping wet. His clothes are tattered, maybe from being on the road too long. His face is gaunt, eyes hollow. Where you headed? I ask after a few minutes of silence, the only sound the tires sloshing against the wet road. He turns to me, his voice barely above a whisper. Just south. Something about the way he says it gives me the creeps, but I shake it off. I've picked up all kinds of people over the years. This guy's just another drifter, right? We drive for a while in silence, and I start to notice things. The air in the cab is getting colder. My breath fogs up the glass even though the heater's blasting. I glance at him again, and this time I swear I see something in his reflection in the side mirror. Something not quite human. Everything all right? I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. He doesn't answer, just stares out into the night. Then slowly he turns toward me. His eyes, they're wrong. Dark, empty pits. No whites, no pupils, just black voids. My stomach tightens. Something's not right. I grip the wheel harder, knuckles turning white. You okay, man? He finally speaks, but the words don't make sense. You shouldn't have stopped. A cold shiver runs down my spine. Before I can react, the radio flickers on, crackling with static. Through the noise, I hear a voice, my own voice, whispering, "Turn back, Dave. Don't look at him." My heart races, hands slick with sweat as I grip the wheel tighter. What the hell? The hitchhiker smiles, a wide, unnatural grin that stretches too far. It's too late now. I slam on the brakes, the truck skidding across the wet pavement. But when I look over, the seat next to me is empty. There's no sign of him. The rain keeps pouring down, relentless, as I sit there in the middle of the road, gasping for breath. I sit there for what feels like hours, gripping the wheel, staring at the empty seat. My heart pounds in my chest, and I keep glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see him standing by the side of the road again. But he's gone, disappeared into the rain. I swallow hard and pull the truck back onto the road, trying to shake the feeling that's gnawing at my gut. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. I mean, who wouldn't get a little jumpy on a night like this? But as the miles pass, something keeps nagging at me. I can still feel the cold in the cab, like the hitchhiker never really left. And then there's the radio, silent now, but I can't shake the memory of my own voice warning me. That wasn't normal. Nothing about tonight is normal. An hour later, the rain's still pounding, the wipers working overtime. I'm starting to feel a little more in control when I see it again. Up ahead, in the glow of my headlights, there's a figure standing by the side of the road. My stomach drops. It's him. Same tattered clothes, same hollow face. I grip the wheel tighter, hands trembling. No. I drive past him, not slowing down this time. But as I glance in the rearview mirror, my blood turns to ice. He's sitting in the back of the cab, soaked and grinning that unnatural grin. "Keep going, Dave," he says softly, his voice like nails on glass. "We've got a long way to go." I slam on the brakes again, but this time the truck doesn't stop. It keeps going like I'm not even in control anymore. The steering wheel jerks in my hands and the hitchhiker leans forward, his cold breath on the back of my neck. "You picked me up, Dave. You can't just leave me now." My heart races, panic clawing at my chest. I don't know what to do. I grip the wheel harder, trying to regain control, but it's useless. The truck's speeding up, the engine roaring, and I'm hurtling down the highway with no way to stop. The hitchhiker laughs, a sound that chills me to the bone. "You should have listened." The radio flickers on again, the static filling the cab, and through it I hear my own voice once more. This time it's different, more frantic. You're not going to make it, Dave. Turn back. Now. But it's too late. The hitchhiker leans closer, his voice barely a whisper. You belong to the road now. And then the world goes dark. When I wake, everything is still. The rain has stopped and the cab is filled with an eerie silence. I blink a few times, disoriented. My hands are still on the wheel, but the truck isn't moving. We're parked, but I don't remember stopping. I glance at the dashboard, the engine's off. The road ahead is empty, stretching out into the blackness. There's no sign of the hitchhiker. My heart's still pounding, but for a moment, I think maybe I've been given another chance. Maybe whatever just happened is over. Then I see it. In the distance, barely visible in the rearview mirror, headlights approach, but something about them is off. They're too dim, flickering like they're struggling to stay on, and they're coming straight for me. Instinct kicks in. I turn the key in the ignition, but the truck won't start. I try again. Nothing. Panic sets in as the lights get closer, the truck behind me speeding up. I fumble with the keys, sweat dripping down my forehead. Come on. Come on. Suddenly the radio crackles to life again, and this time it's not static. It's the hitchhiker's voice, calm and cold. You can't outrun it, Dave. My blood runs cold. I look back at the approaching vehicle, heart racing. The lights are almost on top of me now, but there's something strange. There's no driver. The truck is empty, hurtling toward me at breakneck speed. I brace for impact, but just as the headlights flood the cab, everything goes black. I wake again, gasping, drenched in sweat. I'm still in the truck, but now I'm in the middle of nowhere, no highway, no other cars, just an empty dirt road under a starless sky. I look around, trying to get my bearings, but the landscape is wrong. This isn't anywhere near the interstate. It feels wrong, like the air is too thick, the shadows too deep. Then I hear it. The crunch of gravel behind me. I turn slowly, dread twisting in my gut. Standing behind the truck is the hitchhiker, his grin wider than before. His eyes are still those empty pits of darkness, swallowing all the light around him. You didn't listen, Dave, he says, his voice dripping with mockery. You never should have picked me up. I try to speak, to ask what he wants, but my throat is dry, the words stuck. He steps closer, his figure looming in the shadows. This is where the road ends for you, he whispers. You're never going back. Before I can react, the ground beneath the truck shifts. The dirt road starts to crack, splitting open into a dark, yawning abyss. My truck tips, sliding toward the edge. I grab the door handle, but it's locked, won't budge. The truck lurches, tipping farther as the hitchhiker watches, his grin growing impossibly wide. Welcome to the end of the road, Dave. The truck plunges into the darkness, and I scream, but there's no sound, just the feeling of endless falling, the hitchhiker's laughter echoing in my ears. Story the end.